once again.
Welcome to the Bee Whisperer with the Queen Bee, and we're talking more about beekeeping and our love of beekeeping in particular. And while we're waiting for folks to join us, we'll talk about what we're experiencing right now, weather-wise and that sort of thing.
Yes.
36 inches or so of snow in the last couple of weeks, well, even the last 10 days or so.
Yeah, I mean two snowstorms in just under a week.
So we are going to fumble around a little bit with
Just
the
a little
technology
bit.
as we go. We hope we are live, and as soon as we see comments knowing, then it'll be kind of the stress factor disappearing.
Right.
But it would be neat to stick the phone, show the what's going on out there right now. Out the window, the hives are about half buried in snow, maybe a little bit more. We've had the rain in between the snowstorms, so it kind of consolidated the first 20 inches down to maybe 10.
Right.
And then wet snow on top of that, and then powdery snow. So things are drifting and blowing around.
And it's cold today.
And it's pretty chilly
about
today.
16 degrees out there today.
Yeah.
So we just want to make sure we've got our chat set up here because we want some feedback for anybody who would like to talk with us. Let's make sure we've got that on. I'm just not seeing
Don't
that.
see it yet. It seems to say live video is starting. Hopefully we get it right. But the keeping bees in Maine during the wintertime can be a little bit slow going.
Yep.
It's a time when stress is on the beekeeper as well as the bees, because right now the bees are hunkering down. They're trying to conserve their energy. They're utilizing the honey that they've stored there, and that's why they've stored so much honey. Just like we've got to burn an awful lot of heating oil this time of year, the bees will be burning through honey, through eating it and then generating heat, etc. What we're saying, it's working fine, so we needn't worry about it. That's good. Thank you very much, Anne. We haven't seen the comments coming on the Facebook page yet, but I'm sure that's going to come through in good time, so we can relax.
Yes. All right.
So beekeeping, and I like the idea of saying the joy of beekeeping. Amy wanted to call it "Let's Talk Beekeeping." Let's talk bees.
Let's talk bees.
But I think we can do both. So, the thing about, let's talk about, say, what got us into beekeeping in the first place. How did you get into beekeeping?
You know, it's funny because when as I've talked earlier in other videos, I have a high stress job and I really needed a hobby. I mean, I needed a way to unplug from what I did for a living and just take my mind off things. And I was looking for a hobby. And, why I chose bees, I have no idea. I can't even tell you why, because I was petrified of them. It's scary, scary phobia. I mean, anything would buzz in my car, I would jump out of my car, whether it was stopped or not. And I was terrified of them. And for whatever reason, I saw one of your commercials and I took a class and I immediately became hooked. And ever since then, it's like it's been my, I work, I have my family, I work, and my bees. And they're all such a huge part of my life. Even my day to day, like in the summertime, there's rarely a morning when I'm not working. If I'm not working, I've got my cup of coffee and I'm out in the backyard with my coffee, just watching
them.
Just watching them.
Yeah. I mean, the stress busting element of beekeeping came to me very late in my beekeeping. I wasn't particularly stressed as an 11-year-old when I started off my beekeeping, so I got into it more through the joy of being in nature. I was always interested in animals and that sort of thing, but the stress busting really became a big thing for me as my job became much more stressful 10, 15 years ago or so. And I think without that, I could have been in trouble, really.
Yeah.
Having the release of just being able to go into a group of organisms like that, it's almost like stepping inside a living animal, and seeing how tens of thousands of creatures all working together, as if they were one unit,
Yeah.
which is exactly what they are. And it's just an incredible feeling. Whenever I think of then I sort of think back my early days of keeping bees. When I was about 12 or so, it was my second spring. I now had 3 hives, and had some of my hives at a friend's farm, and it was in their apple orchard, and a couple of hives under the apple trees there, and it was in Massachusetts. I think it was late April, and the apple trees had come into bloom, and my 2 hives were growing really well because I got my bees at the beginning of April, and the bees were growing really well. And I just remember the tree above me were alive with bees, and just it was the first time it really dawned on me just what an incredible experience it was, how peaceful it was.
Yeah.
The bees, the beautiful, gentle hum going on there. You knew the bees weren't threatened by you at all. You see them creating loads of honey in the combs, lots of brood and everything. And every time, for several years, I didn't have bees in my 20s and 30s, university and things, but any time I'd have a warm spring day, I'd think back to that day.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of a sort of magical experience.
It truly is. I mean, and you, like you said, it's like being inside it's like its own little city.
Yeah.
Each bee has a job to do. They're not just a bunch of bugs hanging out in a box. I mean, there's purpose to what they do. And when you watch them, you see some bees dragging out bees that have died inside the hive. You know, your cleaner bees, and you got other bees that are specifically flying out of the hive to go and collect nectar. And they all have a job. And then you've got the ones that are, you know, a couple of them are bouncing on your veil saying, you know, what are you doing? Those are your guard bees. I mean, they all have a job to do, and it's so fascinating, and it's hard to describe that unless you've actually stood near a hive and watched that. And
I think now one of my biggest thrills in beekeeping is having somebody join me in the bee yard,
Yeah, that's the
especially
best.
folks
That's the
who've never
best.
done it before.
Yep.
They've always wanted to. They might have been a bit scared to do it, but going into the bee yard, and they start, you open it up, and the bees don't attack them and that sort of thing. You don't have like this big cartoon caricature of millions of bees in the air flying after you. The bees just going about their business, and you can look at it, you see them doing a waggle dance, and you can describe what's going on there, and even figure out where the bees are getting that pollen or nectar from, this sort of thing. And you see the look on their face, and I should immediately think back to being a 12-year-old in that apple orchard with the bees there for the first time. You see that look on their face. It really is.
It's amazing. And I've got not only do I have hives in the city, I have some out in a more rural area, and it's actually near a campground where we have a seasonal site, and the campground owner is gracious enough to allow me to have some bees out there as well. And I've had kids and some of the other campers come up while I'm tending the bees, and one of my favorite things to do is to pull a frame of honey out of the hive, you know, shake the bees off it and take it over to them and let them, you know, put their finger in it and taste that honey, and just the look on their face, like, oh my gosh, that's delicious, and the interest that creates. And all of a sudden I have people that are down at the campground that want to come up and work them with me, and I have one in particular, I won't mention her name because I don't want to embarrass her, but she's doing a great job. She's with me almost every day when I go in the hives at the campground, and it's the fact that I started those hives out there, and I've shared my passion with somebody, and they've bit into it as well, and just absolutely love doing it. It's so rewarding to get people to kind of get past the phobia of the bee. I mean, honeybees aren't wasps. Wasps are nasty. Let's just say it. Wasps are nasty. They're aggressive.
They're bullies.
They're bullies. They're carnivores actually, and you know that's not the temperament of the honeybee whatsoever. It's nothing like that. So they're actually quite gentle, and you know it's that fear that some people might have of, oh, you know, when they think of, oh, a bee. well, in their mind, they don't separate wasp from bee.
Yeah.
They think it's one type of critter, and it's not. It's totally not.
Yeah.
So
Another thing I really liked about keeping bees is I always wanted a hobby that made something.
yeah,
Whether it was vegetables from the garden or I sell night crawlers and that sort of thing. I was into fishing, but I'd sell night crawlers. But then when I was starting with bees, I started to sell honey. And of course, I remember harvesting my first honey, which is wonderful in its own right. But I also got a thrill out of selling my first honey and that sort of thing. And actually, it wasn't that long ago, maybe about 10 years ago. I remember you harvesting your first honey here.
that's right. Here with you was the very first time.
Extracting your honey in the honey kitchen downstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually.
I think we've got a picture of that somewhere.
Yeah, we do, and I think you were at your other house at that time when
Yes.
you were.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't downstairs. Yep. It was at my other place. That's
at
right.
the other
yeah.
place you were at, and
Yep.
and I will never forget that. And there's actually pictures of that, and you can see the look on my face, how of like, oh my gosh, check this out. I got honey,
got honey.
we only did like a couple frames, and I got like 6 or 8 jars, and it blew my mind that I got that much honey out of those few frames. And not only was I hooked before and always out there every day and panicky, like, oh my God, am I doing everything right?
Yeah.
Then when that happened, there's no going back. I mean, from then on, I've just been all about the bees, and the guys even, I call myself the queen bee, and I didn't even choose that nickname. The guys that I work with, that's what they all call me, and that actually, it kind of stuck, and it's kind of cool to have a nickname given to you by other people that is so closely related to what your passion is.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it was great. It was great. So one thing we wanted to say, for whatever reason, and setting this up, it doesn't look like we're able to get some comments going. So if anybody has any questions or anything that they would like us to talk about, send us a message. And if we don't get to it today or while we're doing this live, we'll do a follow-up video or post some answers on the page as well.
What we really need is a teenager to come in here.
We need a teenager.
And do it with us.
We do.
And show us the questions. They're right there. Can't you see
Yeah,
them?
can't you see that? What are
So,
we doing wrong?
Our apologies for not being able to see these. If we knew what we were doing, if someone's out in the driveway by any chance, come on upstairs in the barn. We'll sort out this problem here where we can't see the chat questions. That's really unfortunate. But what we will do is we'll follow this up with another video.
We will.
And we'll make a video, and we'll still write in your questions, and we'll follow up those questions with a separate video. And if we manage to cure the problem before we go off air, we'll respond to those questions. But humble apologies for that. These old folks still don't know how to use the technology
still
that
don't.
we're
Yeah,
playing with.
we skipped a step somewhere. I'm not quite sure where that was. So
Yeah.
and so we don't know if we're talking to 2 people or 200. We have no idea.
Yeah, I've had a message saying that we're on air, so
That's
some
what
of it's going right.
Yeah, exactly. So again, questions or anything, send them via Messenger or post them right on the Bee Whisperer page, and we'll get back to everybody on that. So yeah, so let's keep talking. Let's get the housekeeping stuff out of the way. So
Right.
let's just go back and talk about bees and one thing about in the city too, gardening. I mean, I've got ornamental gardens all around me, and people don't realize, they're like, oh, my gardens look so wonderful, and I'm like, oh, you're welcome. Because I know my bees go to their gardens and pollinate their gardens for them, and there's a big building with a decent garden right across the street from me, and I know darn well my bees are over there all the time, and I actually walked by them and told them how beautiful their gardens were, and they commented on how many bees that they had visiting there, and that how it was, they weren't aggressive or anything like that, and I actually told them, I'm like, well, those are probably my girls. And we had a nice little discussion about that. So
Yeah, you can really see the impact on things like apple trees, fruit trees in particular, berries. But any fruit fruit or vegetable that needs pollinating, you see a real difference. I mean, some of the fruit and vegetables are, of course, pollinated by other types of insects other than honeybees. But the ones that are pollinated by honeybees, boy, it makes a big impact locally, because the bees don't want to fly any further than they have to, and they will go to the near stuff first and then to the farther away stuff. Now, in terms of, I mean, pollination is probably the most important thing that we do, and whilst I'm no longer sending out many colonies for pollination, I do most years some, and that's kind of fun as a beekeeper, because as long as you know your bees are going to be fairly safe there, someone's paying you to have your bees somewhere where they're just growing, and you go and pick them up, and they give you $200 per hive, which is kind of wonderful. It's a great way of having your bees earn some money before you've even done anything with them.
Right.
So it's a fun way. And this, as I said before, one of my hobbies as a kid was anything that made me a little bit of money was great. I wish I could have had my bees out for pollination then, but that was very good. But I'm going to check what these pings are right now.
Right. It might be the fix.
Click box on right of your bottom line, display red line. It's a speech bubble with a circle in it.
All right, it looks like we may have a fix here. So
it should then display.
Say that again.
I will say it again. A check box on right of your bottom line, display red line. It's a speech bubble with a circle in it. It should then display your comments. A speech bubble.
Do you see a speech? I don't see a speech bubble with a circle in it. No. Once again, we. Yeah, no, I don't see anything like that. So let's like I said, we'll do it the hard way. Send in any questions or comments or anything you'd like to know about bees or anything like that, and we'll follow up with that and just post them to the page. And I'm sure there'll be a comment place or somewhere on the page. Just do it that way. So I've brought in back to like introducing people to the hobby. I have a young niece who I've introduced to bees, and I've extracted honey with her in the garage, and gave her a jar of honey that she helped to extract, and she took it home, and then she was telling her parents, look at the honey I made.
Yep.
And it was just how excited she was at that, and it just to be able to share it with someone and see the amazement, and there's nothing like it. I mean,
it was one of the thrills of my beekeeping this summer when my grandson went into the bees for the first time at 3 years old. So it's hard to find a suit for someone who's only about this high, but it was great. He my son and his wife and Oliver were out in the bee yard, and Oliver's been watching some of my videos on watching Grandpa's bees make him honey.
Yes.
And so it's
specifically,
and they're making the honey for Oliver.
Yep.
And so Oliver was able to go into the beehive with me, and we saw the bees making honey, and you could see the honey in the comb and everything. And then we went down to the kitchen afterwards and extracted a little bit of honey and put some in a bottle for him to take away and that sort of thing. That was a great experience for me, particularly.
Right, and to be able for them to learn like where it comes from, and with the honey, I've had people for the very first time taste honey, from my hive, and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Right. And what I like to tell them is, the stuff that you get in the grocery store, that's not honey. Right. That's not honey.
Yeah. I just had a text from Anne. Thank you for doing this, Anne. It's really helpful. She said, mite treatments and observation hives are people's requests mainly so far. So mite treatments, yes. In terms of keeping bees, probably we wanted to talk sort of about the fun we have with beekeeping. Mite treatments, one of the least fun things about beekeeping. But just to help you out, if you can control mites in your bees, you're controlling most of what gives your bees problems. And by being able to sample your bees and knowing how to do that and using the right treatments at the right time, understanding when mites are going to become a problem and under what circumstances, then you can apply the right treatment at the right time. You can keep mites at bay. And over the years, I've gone from losing half to a 40% of my hives, 50% of my hives, which a lot of beekeepers would do, to losing 10% of my hives, and then not always to mite, it's queen issues or something like that. And so once you can understand the mite treatments and things, then you're ahead of the game. We're planning to do another Facebook Live next week, at which time we will have these question issues sorted out. But next week we'll talk much more about how to keep bees and the steps towards keeping bees successfully. Today we'll do a little bit less of that. Maybe observation hives we can talk about.
Observation, those are wonderful. Now we've had observation hives. So basically what an observation hive is, it's the size of a nuke box, and if you don't know what that is, that's like for 5 frames. It fits 5 frames of bees, and it's a small box, and then it has an upper part that's got glass on either side, and you bring one of those frames up into that glassed in portion, and you can actually see the bees through the plexiglass doing their thing. And usually when we're running an observation hive, we try to pull the frame up with the queen on it, so they can see, you know, depending on what time of year it is, she's either laying eggs, or if, like, we've had them in the fall or in the wintertime, she's like, why am I, you know, why is it so bright in here right now? You know, not, you know, walking around. And but you get a really, you know, and that's, you know, we worked up here in Bangor, we had the Harvest Festival, and that was probably one of the biggest draws up there. We'd constantly have people around this observation hive where they could see the bees up close, and there was no apprehension because you knew they were enclosed.
Yeah. In fact, I'm planning to run several observation hives in the shop here next year. Yeah. I'm going to put them through the back wall over here. But I remember prior to me getting my first bees, I'd always been interested in bees because my dad had told me stories of his boyhood with his uncle in the Isle of Man and helping him extract honey and things. And I thought, I really want to do that. Then we went to the Springfield, I think it was the Big E in Springfield, and there was an observation hive there, and I spent the rest of the day at the observation hive. I was just transfixed by this observation hive, and I was probably then about 9 or 10, and that really, I think when my parents saw me being glued to it, then the next opportunity they had, they were talking to a friend of theirs who was a beekeeper, who then gave me the equipment, and the rest is history. But the observation hive is what got me hooked. And
it's such a great educational tool, because not only, like, we used it at the Harvest Festival, but a lot of our members here in our local beekeeping club, Penobscot County Beekeepers, we have some of our members, they'll go to schools and they'll talk to children, and they'll take those hives with them, or, you know, whatever group wants to see it. And it's just such a great educational tool. And even those of us who've been keeping bees for a long time, I'll stand there and just watch. You know, it even doesn't matter how long you've been keeping them. It's still fascinating. It's still fascinating to watch them. Oh, yeah. And I remember one year, it was last year, we had our observation hive up at the Harvest Festival, and there was a piece of paper that there was either, like, we'd put some food in the bottom or something like that, and it had a piece of paper, and there was this one bee carting this piece of paper around and around and around, like, where is the exit?
Where's the door gone?
He was trying to take the trash out, and he couldn't. So, I mean...
She.
Oh, she. That's right. Oh, wow. That's a big faux pas there. But, yeah, so, and then she's like, you know, she just couldn't take the trash out, and for hours, she walked around with this piece of paper.
Yeah.
So observation hives are a really great tool.
One of the things at this time of year I love with the bees is, although we're left with not much we can do right now, we have harvested things like our honey, but we've also harvested wax.
Yes.
And so I love doing things with the wax as well, sort of whether it's making candles or lip balms or hand creams. There's all sorts of crafting type things we can do as well. And again, going back to, I love to make a little money from what I was doing. You can make most of your income from the wax products that you make, if that's the way you want to gear your beekeeping up.
Yep.
Because it takes very little wax to do things like making lip balms, and you can turn an ounce of wax into 20-something lip balms. And if you're selling each of those at $3 a piece, you're starting to really make a little bit of money
Yeah.
in your hobby as well.
Yeah.
So it's always appealed to me on so many different levels. But I like making stuff, and I think for the crafters out there, that's another one.
And your hand cream, that was a big hit at a recent
Yeah.
craft
Yeah.
fair that we had. That hand creams and
Yeah.
lip balms, and there's just so much you can do.
And there's lots of uses for things like beeswax and things, but I've filled cracks up in furniture or chips in furniture, or trying to not let Anne know I damaged the furniture, or putting beeswax in there and polishing it up. And
I'm
stuff.
expecting a text from her now saying, "What?"
Oh, that explains it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Blamed it on the dog last time. And I said,
Usually.
yeah. Yeah, no, there's just so many things that, and I highly recommend this hobby to anybody. And even if you have that fear of bees, take a class and learn what they're really about, and it'll really start to put any type of fear you have at ease.
Yeah.
Because the fascination and the amazing part of it quickly takes over any type of phobia or fear. And what I realized is it wasn't a reasonable, I'm like, why was I so afraid?
Yeah.
But it's just that little hurdle to get over, and it's just it's rewarding. It's you're helping the environment, you're helping your neighbors with gardens,
You're
helping
saving
with
the bee.
pollination, and you're helping to save the bees. And it's a labor of love, definitely.
Definitely, yeah. Now, if anyone is interested in taking up beekeeping, we will be doing classes here. But we've also set up Beekeeping 24/7, and we'll be posting the link on this shortly, immediately after this. So basically, we're over the next couple of weeks, and we'll explain more about what we're doing with Beekeeping 24/7, and the ways it's good to think about your beekeeping and make your decisions whether you want to or not. But for those of you who've already decided, I want to keep bees and I want some help with that, follow up the link and we'll be able to help you through Beekeeping 24/7. But much more of that next week and the week after. I'll just check to see if there's something that could help us here. What do you need to start a hive this year? What's the best to start with? Thank you, Anne. Okay, what you need to start with a hive, I would always recommend you typically have two main commercially available options for starting up your bees. Apart from the equipment itself, you can purchase your bees in what's known as a package of bees, which is a screen cage with a queen bee and roughly 3 pounds of bees. 3 pounds of bees is about 12 to 13,000 bees, which sort of a group of bees about that sort of size. There we go, about that sort of size. And that is enough to get combs built, the queen supported, and she starts to lay eggs, etc., and the colony will usually take off. The only problem with the package of bees is that you're starting with an unrelated queen bee to that group of bees, because the queen has to be raised separately from that group of bees. It's just the way these things are made up. And so they can be a bit more problematic in terms of starting up bees that way. What I strongly recommend is that you start off with a nuke or a nucleus colony, which, as Amy referred to before, is usually a small colony. With the ones I produce here are 5 combs, and within those 5 combs you usually have 3 of them which are full of developing bees called brood, and the other 2 combs are usually a bit of brood, a bit of honey, a bit of pollen, and sometimes a bit of space for them to expand into. Between the bees, a package costs a little bit less. They're about $140, $150. The nuke, a little bit more, around $200 to $230 or so, depending on where you get them and the type of bee you get. In addition to that, you'd want equipment, things like your beehive and your protective gear. Typically, your whole package of beehive and protective gear, etc., you'd probably be able to get that for between $500 and $600, depending on the level of bee suit you get or protective gear.
And that's with everything.
And that's totally dependent on how comfortable you are with the bees. Because you and I both wear full bee suits, and some people just wear a veil and gloves. And it all depends on your comfort level amongst the bees, and also like to make a point of wearing a bee suit anyway, because I don't feel people should ever feel pressurized to not wear a bee suit, not wear gloves and things. It's totally a matter of keeping you comfortable with the bees, and that if you're comfortable and not worried about getting stung by bees, which happens occasionally, but if you're not worried about getting stung because you're so well protected, then you can totally relax. Then you can totally relax with bees. When I was a kid keeping bees, I didn't get stung my first 4 years by my bees. And it's only once you start really messing around with them, if you're suited up, occasionally they might be able to sting through the gloves a little bit, or you didn't zip something up properly and the bee gets in there. That's usually the way.
Yeah, it's really not. You really don't get stung all that much, and then usually it's your own fault if you do. But you might get one, like I said, through the glove, and some people pay really good money for that type of therapy. And we get it for free if we make a mistake. So usually it's something that we've done. And once you get used to your bees, and you actually learn how to read a hive, just by the sound. I can be working a hive, and that slight sound change says, "All right, Nickerson, we've had enough. Get out." And I get out.
It is amazing that you can hear the tone, the sound of the bees, the way they move, and it's something you become very familiar with. But in terms of the behavior of the bees telling you they've had enough, that becomes really obvious. But when you're working the bees on a beautiful spring day,
they're calm.
You could have been in there for hours. You could have been in there with no bee suit on, no gloves on, no veil on, no shirt on. You could have been in there and you're not in any trouble at all. Because they are just, it's so relaxed, and it really is sort of an idyllic sort of hobby for those of you if you're into gardening and you want the pollination and things. But this is taking it, the nature side of things, and just bringing it right there. And then all of a sudden you're into botany. You start every time you drive anywhere, you're thinking, oh, this would be a great place for bees. And look at this thing, this in bloom. I wish I had some bees here. Look at that linden tree in bloom, and that sort of thing. It's covered in bees.
And so if you're not sure if this is something you're interested and you're not sure, either reach out to a local beekeeper. I know that pretty much I can speak for all beekeepers. We love to talk about bees, which is kind of what we're doing right here, right now. And
we could go for hours.
I'm sure that they would be more than willing to let you see what they do, or take a class and learn ahead of time, and kind of see what the process is and what you'll need. And I'll tell you, you take a class, and by the end of the class, you're like, I'm ready for bees. I want some bees.
And I gather a lot of folks are just asking, what's the best way to get started? Taking a class, as Amy says. We're going to talk much more about that next week. We're coming to the end of our show today, but we'll be talking a lot more about that next week in particular, about the steps that you should take to get into beekeeping. And I'll see if there was another question along those lines. The best way to start a hive this year, what's the best to start with? In terms of the equipment that we use, it's called a Langstroth hive. There's a lot of different designs of hives, but 90% of beekeepers use what's called the Langstroth hive. And of the Langstroth design, there's 8-frame hives and 10-frame hives, and most people use 10-frame hives. And that's just the way most beekeeping is done. The 8-frame hives are great, but harder to get hold of. They're great for keeping weight down and things. But
weight is good. Weight means honey.
Weight means good is good, And typically any of the boxes that get super heavy, those you don't have to move around very much anyway, because they stay at the bottom of the hive. Those are the deep boxes, which you don't usually have to move around virtually at all when they're full of honey. And you can usually get away with just tipping them, as opposed to rocking them back to see what's underneath and that sort of thing. When you're looking at hives, the lower parts of the hive, normally it's not full of honey at that time, and then they're relatively easy to move around.
So like Peter said, there's different kinds of hives. You want to start off with your basic hive. Depending upon what you put in, if you put in packaged bees or if you put in a nucleus colony, the nucleus colony is going to grow a lot faster. So you'll need to expand from 1 box to 2.
Yeah, basically a nucleus colony is a colony that's partially grown
Already
on.
started.
So if you compare a package with a nucleus colony for the extra $50, basically what you're
Yeah.
doing is you're getting a colony which is maybe 5 weeks more advanced than a package would have been. Furthermore, with the nuke, you don't have the issues with the queen because the queen is already
Right.
the mother of the brood in the hive and the bees in the hive. And so I strongly urge you, if you're starting with beekeeping this year and you haven't ordered your bees yet, order nukes to be relatively problem free. I mean, you'll still have to look after the bees and that sort of thing, but the biggest hurdle when you're first starting out in the first couple of weeks or month is issues with the queen. And with the nuke, you don't have issues with the queen. With a package, well, maybe 20% of the hives might have some issue with the queen. Most of the time they get over that and that is resolved. But a package is a little bit more headachy. And with the nuke, you're more or less guaranteed a good start.
And your queen is already laying eggs. She has laid eggs. They're rearing the babies and the what we call brood. And with a package, your bees have to build up those wax foundation. There's foundation in there, but they have to build up the cells for the queen to lay in. So she's kind of like, she can't immediately start right off and start laying. So unless you put some old comb in.
Yeah.
So
And speaking of
this, did we hit our time?
We're
Wow, that
about
went fast.
35 minutes we've gone so far, so we could talk all day about bees. But if you found this partially interesting and would like this a little bit more information for us to answer your questions, and then tune in next week. Roughly the same time we're expecting you. We'll put an announcement on if we have to change our schedule at all. But we'll see you same time next week and tell you more about how to get into beekeeping, the steps you might want to take to get into beekeeping.
And for those of you who think you're ready, or even interested in classes, we'll post a link to the Beekeeping 24/7, which is our online classes, mentoring, everything you need to know and help along the way. So
That's right.
But thank you for those of you who joined us. We have no idea how many of you there were because obviously I didn't quite set this up right. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, off.
Yeah, we still don't know.
Yeah, we still don't know how to do
this.
this. We're trying to figure out how to turn this off.
close
No, just close it.
Close it and run away.
Yeah, get away. Really?
Well, that might have done it. No, I
that
don't
didn't
think
do
so. I don't think so. Where is it? Is it this thing over here?
Oh,
people,
this is embarrassing, people.
People are going to have a good poke of fun at us. Live. Top left, try that.
Why is this all?
Oh,
Yeah, this is embarrassing, folks.
I'm gonna go away.
Yeah, we're just gonna walk.
leave
away. Everybody,
Amy.
just walk away from your computers now. We're gonna figure out how to get out of this, and yeah.
What the heck is going on here? Webcam, turn it off. Turn it off.
Make
Facebook
it stop.
Live. Go
Make
away.
it stop.
Yes, we definitely.